Welcome to Chapter 8, The Environmental Imperative. When we are here, where are we? That's right, Casper, Wyoming. And looking at our chapter here, The Environmental Imperative. Casper being a location for oil and gas industry here in the state of Wyoming. We'll look at how oil and gas industry fits into the environmental imperative in a quick way here in our chapter. Philip Kotler, one of the most distinguished scholars in marketing, he's written about the environmental imperative, how business needs to do better with regards to the climate and air, soil, water quality, resource depletion. There are ways to track this now. We have a Sustainable Development Goals tracker here, and it's interactive. We can go to any of these of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals here. Let's go to clean water and sanitation. Look at how the world's doing here with regards to safely managed drinking water. Darker colored countries have safely managed drinking water. Those that are lighter in color, much less. We even have some in Africa that are coming up with just a fraction of the water that citizens have access to that is clean water. With regards to sanitation facilities, again, the dark lines here, or dark colors, mean that there's more accessible sanitation facilities around the world. We can see that in the year 2000, things were not as good. And as we progress now across the years here, we see more colors coming into view, suggesting that in some places, sanitation is improving around the world. For firms to attain sustainability, Kotler says CEO and senior executive pay package will have to change. So it brings us back to that employee issue in management and leadership. So if the employee, the CEO in this case, is incented in the right way, and that looking at non-financial performance with regards to care for the environment, other stakeholders, it's more likely that that will happen for that particular CEO in that business. Macro marketing has schools of thought, the developmental school, looking at business as being a solution to environmental problems. The critical school, really seeing business and marketing as being the source of the problem. When we look at Alex Steffen's terms here for shades of green over on the right side, we see that the managerial marketing school could either ignore or give light treatment to environmental issues, putting it on the individual consumer for personal responsibility. Macro marketing, emphasizing more innovation and regulation of business to have a bright future, therefore bright green. And then the macro marketing critical school, radical change of this world system is needed, having a dark green perspective here. What would it be like if there's no growth in the world? This was considered a few years ago in the New York Times. Experts that were consulted, economists primarily, said this really shouldn't happen. When there has been no growth, wars are more likely to happen. There's unemployment, civil unrest. So they were saying that economic growth, as long as population is growing, needs to go on as well. But can the dominant social paradigm be changed? Critical school says we're headed to a cataclysmic set of events in the future if we don't change. Perhaps gradually green and green consumption could be part of the future here, with the LOHAS segment leading the way. But critics point out, how can you consume your way to a more environmentally sound future? We go to conservationists like Miles Silman. I interviewed him at Wake Forest University a few years ago. Let's go and hear from Miles right now.
I do think that we are at something of a turning point in our.
Hi, I'm Mark Peterson, author of Sustainable Enterprise, a macro marketing approach. Thanks for being with us today. We have a treat with Miles Silman. Miles is the Andrew Sabin Family Foundation Presidential Professor of Conservation Biology here at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Miles is an ecologist, and most of his region. And so he has a very interesting story to tell us here today. So Miles, tell us about your work in the Amazon.
So I'm a forest ecologist, and I work on understanding the diversity and function of forests in the Amazon basin, Western Amazon and Andes.
Tell us about species diversity in this region.
So it's hyper diverse. And because it's a large protected area, the species diversity is remaining high. There's been more species of birds seen from one site there in the Western Amazon where we work than breed in all of North America. So it's a scale of diversity that's staggering.
What contributes to this diversity? Why so much?
So that's a great question, and one that people have been asking for hundreds of years. And at one level, it's a simple answer in that you're generating species faster than the species are going extinct. But when you get down to the real causes, it gets to be difficult to untangle them. So there's kind of the question of are the tropics a cradle of diversity, or are they a museum? And it turns out that they're both. And one of the keys that we're finding out to understanding it now is to not only look at things how they are today and look for examples, but you have to look back through time to really understand what's been going on in these systems.
So Miles, this area is in Peru. It's right near the Andes Mountains, but it's in the forest.
That's right.
Okay. And businesses are just beginning to arrive there?
Well, I mean, if you count the Inca and indigenous peoples as businesses and industries, and they certainly had huge amounts of trade, industry's been down there for long, long periods of time. In terms of corporations, their involvement really is more through the extractive industries now. So there's large oil and gas, large mining, and timber companies. But for the most part, it's kind of small entrepreneurs making their living in a frontier environment, much like the U.S. had frontier 150, 200 years ago.
Miles, you mentioned that the species are nature's employees. How does man fit into that? These businesses that are in this region, do you see good effects from their involvement in this region, bad effects?
It is both, right? And they depend on the point of view that you take. Countries and people have wishes and desires in their own personal lives or in their national lives, and these businesses are generating revenue and improving people's livelihoods. I think what you see in these frontier areas is that a lot of the businesses are extractive industries, and some of them are doing it in a way that has a very small footprint. They're actually working to almost become parks unto themselves because they have the incentive to control large amounts of land and keep other kinds of destructive uses out. So one of the things that the oil and gas industry is doing, at least the good players, and it's very positive for conservation, is taking the view of the Amazon basin not as a place where you can cut a road in and start this extraction the traditional way, but viewing it like the North Sea, so seeing it like an offshore model. Where the footprint of the extraction is relatively limited, and that has huge benefits for conservation.
Miles, can you give examples of some of these good business players in this region?
There was a grocery store. It's famous in Peru. It's called Wong. It's in Lima, in the major cities, and that was bought by a multinational corporation built in Chile. And one of the things that they've done is diversified into the forestry sector in Peru. It's a concession called Mataracre. And those guys are innovative in the forest sector. They're doing a really good job. They're thinking about ways to combine not only forest extraction, but carbon offsetting, ecosystem services, and innovative ways to monitor the forest as well.
Miles, you're also director of Wake Forest University's Center for Energy, Environment, and Sustainability. Can you tell us more about that?
So CES is a center that does exactly what the name says. So we study energy, we study the environment, how ecosystems work, and how we can use them as a society, and then also sustainability writ large, how these things interact with people in order to have a society where we use things, but we don't use them up. One of the other things that we do at CES is we're committed to education. So we support education in sustainability, environment, and energy in all of the units around campus. And then we also offered a degree in sustainability, so a Master of Arts in Sustainability degree. And it's really geared toward taking people with some domain knowledge in an area who want to move into the sustainability arena and giving them the tools to operate in that arena.
Miles, sustainable enterprise was written to allow business students to understand a big, broad picture of the marketplace. You're focused on nature, but when you think about business, what big picture comes into mind with regards to how nature and business are interacting with each other these days?
Less in a general way that people should think about nature, and what we shouldn't forget is that humans have large impacts on the natural world. But if we don't push it too far, the natural world has amazing abilities for regeneration. The thing that you have to do is keep all the employees intact. So conservation is really important, and these species that we talk about are important for maintaining these ecosystem services. But nature is resilient, and we should look at it as our biggest and best employee, and it's the one that we should go to first when we're trying to solve some of these environmental problems and climate change. So I would encourage companies, when they're thinking about their sustainability portfolios, to go ahead and try innovative things. We need these kinds of solutions, and I think private sector is one of these places where we can get a lot of innovation.
Thank you for being with us today.
No, it's my pleasure.
Okay, why don't you just pause and think about what you learned there in that interview with Miles Stillman. What did he say about nature that business people should keep in mind? Okay, moving forward, ethical concepts, citizenship, being responsible to society at large, stewardship, being responsible to one stakeholder, and if you're an environmental steward, you're responsible to the natural environment and future generations. Ethical values undergirding marketing activity in the marketplace. The American Marketing Association has proposed 6 dimensions for ethicality. You see them here. They line up with many of the Bill Daniels Ethics Initiative principles. And the one I want to focus on at the bottom here, citizenship, fulfilling the economic, legal, philanthropic, societal responsibilities that serve stakeholders. So all of those stakeholders. When we think about businesses, one of the primary stakeholders they have are employees. We look at Wyoming, we see that in the past few years, we've been cited as one of the most dangerous places in the US to work. It's because of our oil and gas extractive industries. One of my MBA students pointed out that a lot of effort goes into reducing fatalities and injuries in the oil and gas industry. He shared this slide for me. His name's Corby Bracken. He works for DCP Midstream, which is a Fortune 500 company focused on natural gas extraction. What he's showing here is that natural gas has about the same fatalities as, or a little less than, transportation and warehousing. Fewer injuries than even educational and health services where I work. So he's pointing out that a lot of training and effort goes into making sure that people are aware of their surroundings, have the right equipment, and aren't overdoing things in that operating environment there, so injuries and fatalities occur. So it can have an effect in a otherwise what would be a dangerous setting. Employees are the stakeholders easiest for firms to list because firms have a list of their employees. They have to pay income tax, taxes, payroll taxes on them. So they know who these employees are. And so it's a great starting place for businesses to just think about their own employees as resources, not as expenses. So New Belgium Brewery Company is a business that manifests sustainable business practices in many ways. They're transparent. They also are inclusive with their employees. They want them to actually help run the business. And so let's go to Katie Wallace, who's Assistant Director of Sustainability for them, to hear about some of the environmental aspects for New Belgium Brewery.
Our co-founders decided to start this company, Jeff and Kim. They took a hike in Rocky Mountain National Park, and they right there wrote their core values and beliefs and the company purpose. And of course, surrounded by all that beauty, it's hard to ignore environmental stewardship and honoring nature within the process of doing business. We see it as a benefit in many ways because We know that we depend heavily on the rivers that provide for us. It's our number one ingredient. Without clean and abundant and accessible water, we wouldn't be in business, and we wouldn't be alive, of course, right? But being that water is our core, we cared very much about protecting its source and making sure that it is healthy and robust for many generations to come.
You don't get to do this over. There's not going to be another planet, another source of water. I mean, this is what we have to work with. And it's upon all of us to be really careful about that and thoughtful about that. And again, there's this sort of old school way of thinking that says you can't take that into consideration and be successful. And we're trying to prove that wrong. We're trying to say, actually, you can. You can make decisions. You can put solar panels on. You can try to minimize your waste streams. You can, find new ways of energy. All of these things that are investments, but they can pay off and they can make a difference for you.
But most of the ideas that come in, a good portion of them, are not from me. They're from people who are working on the bottling line, and they see these opportunities.
When we built the packaging hall, we had a filler that didn't capture water after we rinsed the bottles out. And we thought, we want a filler that captures that water so we can reuse it to rinse the bottles after we bottle our beer.
We have a process water treatment plant.
New Belgium is a leader in sustainable business practices. A lot of that comes from their employees. So a few years ago, they became 100% employee owned, and they focus on developing the skills and abilities of their workers in the realm of sustainability. They want the place to be a destination for the employees that they're looking forward to coming and contributing to accomplishing good things in the marketplace as well as for the natural environment. Kim Jordan is depicted here in the upper left. She's one of the two co-founders, and she's a longtime CEO for the firm. Quality of life. Katie, we just heard from, she says, what is wealth? Is it bling, or is it being outdoors in a clear environment, organic food from farmers and having lower obesity in schools? We are not just here for more cash and bigger houses. We are here for quality of life. So they emphasize environmental stewardship and their values, lovingly caring for the planet, honoring natural resources, all the way down into here having a model of joyful environmentalism. And their employees are, sources for that joy. They also have the sustainability report, which they're generating on a regular basis. What you can see here is that it's a short report, and they talk about what beer has to do with climate change here. Also, they get down to tracking their own success on diverting solid waste from landfills. Also, their successes and setbacks with regards to energy and water consumption, and they are doing this in a way so that their efforts in non-financial reporting are quickly accessible to their stakeholders, and particularly the employees who make up important stakeholders for the for New Belgium Brewery. So in conclusion here, we have two schools from macro marketing: the developmental school, believing marketing systems can be changed, and that marketing systems are essential for correcting and healing environmental problems. Also, the critical school, which is aligned with maybe the dark green perspective, believing that the culture of consumption must be radically changed. Systems need to be moved to no growth, or to even have a chance for us to defend the natural resources here of the planet. Citizenship and stewardship are important dimensions here in approaches to business that are focusing on a triple bottom line. As a coda or an epilogue here to the story of New Belgium, at the end of 2019, the employee-owned firm sold itself to an international beverage conglomerate. So it was purchased by Lion Little World Beverages, based in Australia, and they are a subsidiary of a huge beverage conglomerate, Kirin Brewery, based in Japan. So some of the aspects of this to consider. There were good outcomes for particularly the owners of New Belgium, and they cashed in 700 employees, getting at least $100,000 for their retirement accounts, some over $1 million. Financial stress for the company was alleviated by this purchase. Also, the Kirin obtained the fourth largest craft brewer in the U.S. Some things in the long term that arise as questions about this purchase. The employees lose control. They're no longer the owners, and they work for a subsidiary of a foreign subsidiary. How will the internal culture change when everybody was an owner? Now they're not. So how will that be nurtured or fumbled in the future? Also, Kirin is a big player in the Myanmar beer market, which has some very troubling issues with regards to treatment of ethnic minorities and also generally civil liberties there in Myanmar. Also, the upside for the Fort Collins economy likely is lost as Kirin's going to year by year try to make the operations in Fort Collins more efficient, and that has implications for the Fort Collins economy. In the future, it's ambiguous whether the managers from Australia and Japan will make or lead New Belgium to be more competitive in the marketplace, or will they bungle things and lead to less competitiveness? So what are your thoughts about the sale of New Belgium to Kirin Brewery?